Hello, my name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, awarded RevTech strategist of 2024. In today's episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, my guest talks about why it's so much harder getting from 1 million to 10 million ARR. And she really breaks down the key elements and stages you need to go through in order to bridge the gap, the learning curve, the gap of difficulty. One of the breakthroughs was really doubling down on working at scale and really thinking about what are the things that really work for you, and stop thinking about sales as the growth lever, but really understanding all of the key elements that creates product, marketing, and sales alignment just as important. You're going to love this discussion. My next guest is a transformational GTM consultant with over 15 plus years of experience. She empowers B2B startup founders to achieve sustainable success on the journey from 1 to 10 million ARR. So welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Monica Stewart.
Hi, so happy to be here, Janice. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really keen to get into this conversation and really kind of lean into your area of expertise and why getting from 1 million to 10 million ARR is much harder than people really expect. What are the things that really separate these companies and make it up to that kind of plateau? What are they doing to kind of bridge that gap?
Oof, it's such a good question, and it really is a much harder journey. There's a really great statistic, I mean, not great, but good to know, that only 4% of all startups even make it to 1 million ARR. And then only 0.04% make it to 10 million ARR. Wow. So if we started with 1,000 companies, only 40 of them would make it to 1 million, and only 4 of those would make it to 10. So, the 0 to 1 journey is really hard, but the good news is that it gets even harder as you continue to have to scale those other plateaus. Like, you're not done yet. And I would say, in terms of what the most successful companies do, I think that the bigger question for founders to ask themselves at that stage is, what are they not doing? Because what I see so often with the companies that I work with is that they get to 1, 2 million. Maybe they raise a Series A, maybe they had seed investors, or maybe it's just their team and they're getting really excited and they're like, great, full on, now we're going to scale this thing. We need to have an SMB motion. We need to have partnerships. We need to, they start doing all of these things, and they often kind of abandon what got them there in the first place. They think that they need to hire a bunch of SDRs and spin up a whole outbound thing. And you absolutely do have to evolve the way that you're working at every stage of growth. But the number one thing that kills startups at each of those stages is premature scaling. So I think that really the question is more what are you going to be disciplined with yourself to not do in order to be able to maintain focus on what is actually working?
I think it's really interesting, that stat, because it really does focus the mind. The chances of you kind of bridging that gap from 1 to 10 million is like going through the eye of the needle. And I wonder if that was widely known, how challenging and difficult it is that, when you do get a tranche of money, the temptation is to spend it, to go large, to go big. Whereas it's a very different mindset to the founder that is bootstrapping, that's slowly and conservatively making decisions, and the right kind of decisions based on the previous experience and the data that they're getting in, because they just don't have the money to waste. So it's interesting that, there's a sudden switch that we're going to go large and we're scared and we finally got the money. What do you think will be the kind of the biggest counter action, or maybe it's just that stat, I don't know. What is the thing that perhaps even those that are giving the money can do to ensure that there's greater success and there isn't that sudden switch of mindset?
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're asking this question, because this is actually the first thing that I work on with all of the companies that I work with. The most important thing to do is, first of all, to really understand what we mean when we say your GTM motion or even your sales motion, right? So this is not like one monolithic thing. What you need to do is you need to be able to understand it in all of the component parts. It is an engine. And if you wanted to diagnose how to work on an engine, you would need to understand what all of the different parts are and how they all work together. So the first thing is really breaking it down into, okay, let's look at how well are we defining our market, and are we consistently winning deals with the same types of people for the same types of reasons. Now, the second thing that you want to do is look at, okay, how are we finding those people, right? Like, are there consistent channels through which they're coming to us? Do we have any of those channels where we feel like we can keep pushing that button and we'll keep getting leads? And then are there other channels that we're investing time in that maybe aren't really performing? Sometimes I'll talk to founders and they're like, yeah, we just started working with this really big partner. And I'll say, like, that's great. Like, how many leads have you gotten from them in the last quarter? And they'll be like, like 6. And then we kind of look at their goals and we work backwards through their funnel math. And I'm like, you're going to need a lot more than 6 leads. Like, I don't think this is the thing that's going to get you there. So, look at your channels, understand also how much of them you can control. Partnerships are usually a little bit more difficult. A channel that you own, like outbound or even, paid acquisition is usually, like, you want to have at least that going first. Then you want to look at, okay, great. You're just breaking down your funnel, right? So once we've got people that are coming to us, what are we doing with them? What does our conversion rate look like in our sales process? If your conversion rate is like under 30%, once you get a discovery call with somebody to closing them for an opportunity, that's like not a good sales process. So you don't want to go and get more top of funnel if that's your situation, because you're going to be investing a lot of energy and a lot of time in pouring leads into a leaky funnel. And guess what? It goes the other way too. If you can figure out how to move somebody through a sales process with high conversion and high velocity, that means that you have learned enough about what the buyer needs to understand at each stage that you can then take that information and actually use it to do more efficient top of funnel, because you know who's going to convert, like who's waiting to hear from you and what you should say to them. So those two things kind of work together. Then you need to look at, okay, now once we've got people that want to work with us and they've signed contracts, like, what are we doing with them? What is their first week, first month, first 30 days, first 90 days look like in terms of their experience with us? Are we getting them to adopt the product? Are we driving expansion deals? Are we doing a training and then ghosting and coming back for the renewal? That would be like not what we want to do, right? And so same thing, like, you put all this work into creating these funnels, attracting these people and getting them really excited about working with you. And then you want to keep that motion going, because like the average value of the first contract, once your company reaches maturity, is going to be very small compared to the total lifetime value of your customers, right? That should be like 10x what your first contract is. And so don't ignore that huge pile of money that's sitting there. And then the last thing that you kind of want to look at is, okay, how is my team functioning? Like, I talk to a lot of teams that are, again, in those early stages, like let's say 1 to 5 million, and they've gotten a lot of wins, but they've gotten a lot of wins through like cowboy behavior. Like they are working hard, they are fighting. I talked to a founder recently that was like, look, my VP of sales is amazing. I told her that we needed 150K in new revenue in a month because like I needed to go and talk to some investors. She found that money, like she made it happen. That's awesome. So then how do you make that something where you can then hire someone and they're able to step in and get the same results? And also, do you have a mechanism for making your team better so that after they've been with you for a year, they're actually performing better in their job than they were when they came to you, and you're not just coasting off the training that they were given in their last position. So I would say the first thing is break down everything that you're doing into those areas. And then you need to benchmark yourself. Like, you're not going to be, you know, best in class doing what a $2 billion company is doing in all of those areas, or in any of those areas wouldn't be appropriate for you. But like, for the stage that you're at, what does great look like? And then how do you compare with that? And usually when I do this exercise with companies, we'll find that like, there's some where they're actually way ahead of their stage. And then there's some where they're like kind of acting like a 1 million ARR company, but they're like trending towards 6 this year. And we're like, okay, well, we need to catch up there. So, you know, you look at like the parts that are working, the parts that are not working, and then you really focus in on the parts that are not working, because the more that you ignore those, the more that they will start to infect the other parts of your system that maybe were working before are going to start to break down because you've got some weak links. And there are a bunch of different ways that you can do this prioritization exercise. But basically what you want to do is kind of, you know, identify and also, without ego, accept where it is that maybe there's some room for improvement. And then the next step after you do that and you have that short list is just to figure out what's going to give you the most leverage right now. So, you know, look at effort versus impact, and prioritize, and then go ahead and start taking action to step by step get those areas to where they need to be. And if you do that every quarter, there's no way that like you're not going to be doing well.
Right. Yeah. Wow. That was a whirlwind 101. It's like people need to replay just that first bit. There's so much I want to delve into, and I kind of have to remember all of these in order. Oh, there's so much to talk about.
Excuse the monologue. I'm doing like
no, it's good, because it's
right
like,
now,
oh my God, there's so much value in that. And it's interesting, you know, by having that structure. Okay, well, let's start at number 1 before you start, you know, at number 7. Let's get all of our ducks in. There is a process here. And so I just thought it was really interesting when you came to the kind of people that you often have a lot of cowboy behavior, and then the example of the sales leader that delivered for the founder and CEO. You know, you often see that happens, but then it makes you, and they may win the investment, which is all very, but how much of that will stay on the books?
That's right.
So that sales leader is good for what you need at that point in time, and then they can be very bad and damaging, you know, once you're in the kind of, okay, well, now we can win business, but we need to keep the business and we need to scale it. So it's really, I thought it was quite interesting. That's a success story. And then when you flip over, that's a disaster story.
That's such a good point. Yes, that's so true. And it's like, the key is understanding when that flips, right? And when that point is, and it's actually like, we cannot keep operating like this anymore. And, you know, I started in this industry as I was an AE. I was like AE number 4 at a Series A startup years ago. And so like, I did that, you know, I was that person. Like, I was the person that was given a team of SDRs with no training and no change in my other responsibilities and told to go figure it out. And like, I was the person that went and built an enterprise sales business with, you know, same thing. And like, I figured it out. And now I know that we don't have to operate that way anymore. Like, if I were to go back now, I would not have done things the way that I did at that time, because I didn't know that there were resources available. And I also didn't know how to ask for help at that stage in my career. And so it's like, yes, we are scrappy and we are getting it done. And we are like, you know, sheer force of will, like making it happen. And to your point, at a certain point, that actually ceases to become a superpower and starts to become a limiting way of operating.
Yeah. So the other aspect that I wanted to talk about was benchmarking. And so like, it's because even the bad behaviors and the scrappy behaviors, as you described, sometimes you kind of need to do that, don't you? Because when
Yeah.
you're a startup, there's so much you don't know. So you kind of need to be able to try anything. The important thing is being able to measure what you're doing, to understand what bits work and what bits don't work. You need to be not have those kind of limits on yourself that, you know, there's a proper way, there's a proper process, because you just don't know. So I think that kind of scrappy behavior suits a startup at a certain period of time, but only as long as you are measuring performance and looking at all the key performance in and understanding. It's almost like building it as you go. The bits that do work, you're going to keep that and understand why it did work, and the bits that didn't, you're going to let go of. And that's how you kind of develop your unique DNA of what works for your market, in your sector, for your product, in your culture, all of that. Because then the other point that you brought up previously was about benchmarking what you're doing, so you understand what works. And, you know, I was thinking that, you know, there is now a database that's available. It's been collecting sales assessments for the last 30 years. And what I love about this resource is that sometimes you don't have the 2 years grace in order to collect all of that information of what best in class for your sector, for your market, for your type of product. You don't always have the luxury of being able to collect all of that data that you need in order to decide on what's the best GTM to grow and scale. And so being able to benchmark someone similar in your industry, in your, you know, that's dealing in a similar market, all of that, being able to benchmark what great looks like and where the gap is between where you are and what the data tells you is success, is a really good shortcut to get to where you really want to be. Of course, you've still got to collect your own data, and it's actually based on your own data, but it gives you that outsider benchmark as well.
That's so key. Yeah. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me that you said is companies that look like you at your stage, you know, because it's like, there's so much information that is available to founders now. Like you can use whatever LLM you like to use, or you can go on LinkedIn and you can be like, what does a great medic discovery process look like? And like, it's great. It's really great. But then the key is understanding, like, okay, should you even be thinking about doing that right now? A, or should you just be thinking about getting your first 10 customers? And then B, like, is this advice that is designed for a company like you, especially right now? You know, there's so many people that are talking about growth hacking of different kinds and GTM engineering. And a lot of that advice is geared for SMB or like PLG companies. And so if you're running like a pure enterprise sales process, the like, you know, Clay hack that generated 700 million in pipeline in 30 days is like probably not going to work the same for you, because your customers don't operate like that. So understanding like, where is this information coming from and what actually applies to my situation is so important.
And that is such a brilliant point, such a key point, because, you know, what in social media, we see a lot of this, you know, follow this process and you'll be as successful as we have been. And people do fall for that. And the thing is, even if that data, that company went through their learning curve and growth stint 2 years ago, that is old information. Our customers have moved on. AI was at its infancy then, whereas now things have completely changed, and we're trying to grasp what's the impact of these changes. So you can imagine taking a successful GTM model 2 years ago, even if it is at the same stage, you can't use half of those tools. You can't use some of that methodology anymore, because it's like even 2 years on, it's all changed. So I think that's a brilliant point for people to recognize. That's why I think what you said about collecting your own data and really recognizing where you are, because then that's almost like the sanity check, isn't it, really, of well, this doesn't quite match up with us and what we've already got. I think, most people, when they're in startup, they don't collect nearly enough data.
I completely agree. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be like this big over-engineered thing, but if you're trying to figure out like, okay, like sales are flat, pipeline is flat, we've got a gap here, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, do you want to just throw a dart at the wall, or do you want to say like, I can go and look at my new salespeople, how they are producing against what I thought they were going to produce in their ramp. I can look at conversion metrics at 3 different stages in my funnel, and then you can kind of pinpoint what's going on. But like, it's if I talk to someone and I say like, what's your NRR, or how many leads do you have to contact in a week in order to book one discovery call, and they don't know what the answer to that question is, it just makes it really hard to isolate like what you should actually do in order to get different results.
Yeah.
And in the absence of having that data, what so many founders do is they're like, well, we'll just like try some stuff. And of course that doesn't really work, but it doesn't have to be hard. You can have, I've worked with people that ran their sales all the way up to like 2-3 million ARR off of an Excel sheet. If you're good at, you can use an Excel sheet. I don't care. Like, you don't have to like build this whole thing. You just need to be keeping track of it somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually simple is often best.
Better. Yeah.
Just as long as you can communicate it, because that's the other thing is I've worked with so many founders, and there's a platform they know and understand. They want the company to adopt it because they feel they're in control of it, because they know understand, but they're really bad at communicating. And the tool's really bad at communicating. So it's a lot of this information is either in the head or in their tool, but it's not communicated across the whole organization.
Yeah. That's such a thing. And like, going in and being like, oh, we need to completely rebuild our CRM when you're like under 5 million ARR. That is like playing at being a startup. Like, that's like being like, oh, we need to redesign the website. Like, that's our problem. No, you need to go sell. Like, you need to go talk to customers. It's not Salesforce. I promise you, the thing that's holding you back is not Salesforce. Maybe in later stages, yes. And probably all the RevOps people are going to come at me after this, but this is the way that I see it.
Well, your focus is going on to implementing a system, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's not going to get you to where you need to be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keeping it simple. I want to ask you about customer success and how that gets you the business and keeps the business. Because, from the day dot when I've been in sales, and so many organizations focus on net new logos. And yes, when you're a startup, that has to be your focus, but they don't switch quickly enough into what was called at that time retention, and now we've got all these fancy words, expansion and velocity and so forth, whatever it's you want to call it and feel comfortable with. But the success factor is that your organization should be invested in customer success and keeping customers and really understanding what your customer and growing with your customers. And this has been almost the scale your sales DNA from the very beginning. So tell me about, can you break it down, especially for leaders prioritizing new logos over customer success, what they should be doing?
So your current customers, again, we talked before about like what you learn in building a really great sales process helps you at the top of your funnel. What you learn in developing a really great relationship, long lasting with your current customers, helps with everything that happens before that, right? Like, it's a virtuous cycle. So I would say that, if you don't know how to get people to value quickly with the product that they bought, and then you don't know how to earn their trust in order to continue to grow that relationship over time, then you have no business focusing on, again, trying to pour more leads into a leaky funnel, because that is a leaky funnel. Like you should be looking at from a net revenue retention perspective, it should be over 100%. So that means that like, if you're just renewing people, you're not doing a good job. That's like not enough. And you're going to have some contractions, et cetera, et cetera. Specifically, like most of all the companies that I work with are in enterprise sales, enterprise and mid-market. And unless you're a very mature organization, you know, I think there was news the other day that Oracle, I think it was Oracle, signed like a $3 billion cloud deal. Amazing for them, right? But like, you're not, and that was probably definitely with a current customer. Like, you know, you see bigger companies like, you know, Snowflake is regularly signing like 7-figure deals. Salesforce is signing 7-figure deals. As a startup, you might see that that is the potential with that customer, but 100%, you're coming in with a first contract that's like 100K or less. In almost every case, maybe up to 200K. But it's definitely not what you want it to be. And so you have to look at your first year is basically just like a long-term pilot. That's how you want to look at it. There are other divisions, there are other products that you can sell them, there are subsidiary companies, they have teams in Europe, whatever it is for you, right? Like that's just the beginning. You want to keep selling, and it is 100% still a sales motion, and it should get easier. So that's where you've got like, you've captured maybe 10 to 20% of the eventual revenue that you can get from that company. And when they sign the first contract with you and you're kicking off, that's like the time that they are the most excited. It is not when you do the first demo. It is after like they have co-invested with you in going through their procurement and their security review and getting all their stakeholders on board, and they want it to work. And if you can like keep that momentum going in that moment, you have amazing upside. But if you drop the ball, it's really hard to get that trust back. So I actually see this as probably the most important moment in sales.
I mean, I completely agree with you. I've talked for a while that, you know, we should be focusing on buyer experience rather than customer experience, because you don't have the customer's experience unless you've nailed the buyer experience. And, you know, so that's the thing that's going to inform, are they looking for an opportunity to get out of the contract and switch from, you know, the get-go, because the experience, you dropped so many balls, but they went too far, or they, you know, there's a time limitation, they, you know, they have to just get something, but as soon as they've got it, they're looking to switch because your buyer experience has been so bad. So you know, and I really like what you say about CS is still a sales process. You know, and understanding that can be 70% of your overall revenue. So yeah, there needs to be a lot more focus on that. This is so interesting. I really do. I want to move on to the founders and startups that you've worked with, and you know, around enterprise sales. What's the most common hiring mistake during the scale up phase?
Over hiring 100%. And, you know, when I post about this on LinkedIn, people will always be like, well, like, you know, we've seen this post a lot. Well, I'm going to keep posting it, and I'm going to talk about it now because people keep making this mistake. You are not ready to hire someone from a Fortune 500 company or a 100 million company to come and run your sales team when you are under 10 million ARR. This person has nothing to do with what you're doing now. And I see it all the time because, and you know, the excuses that I hear from founders are they know what good looks like because they come from a really big sales organization. And so, you know, we thought that they would bring us their playbook. That's one model. It's like you hire somebody that was, maybe they were an individual contributor, maybe they were a director, which means a team lead. And then they come in and you give them a bigger title and you think they're going to bring the playbook that made them successful at like Gong. And they don't know
even if they did, it wouldn't work.
It's not going to work. And they also don't know what it is because they only know like one part of it, right? Like they don't know, they weren't there for the 20 years that went into developing that thing. And it also won't work for you because you don't have all of those other things that those companies have. And then the second kind of like profile of this that I see is like the industry relationships person. So this person is usually more senior in their career. They have been selling to the companies that the founder is selling to for a long time. They also usually come from a much bigger organization, and it's like, they have relationships, they know how these companies work, and they're going to be able to teach us how to sell to these very mysterious enterprise buyers. Like, decision makers these days, even if you're selling to Target or Procter and Gamble or Nestle, they're millennials. They're actually starting to be Gen Z, depending on what department you're talking to, right? Like, the people that you are selling to now are like, you're talking about people maybe like very early Gen Xers. It's like people in their 30s to 50s. And like, the people that that guy that you hired was selling to 10 years ago, they're like not in charge anymore. And it's not only about those specific people not being there anymore, the whole way of doing business has changed. The whole model has changed. And again, if they were actually successful at the other place that they were at, which is also debatable, like, they were able to do that because they had this whole infrastructure around them that allowed them to just go to the conferences and, host dinners and go and shake hands and like be a relationship guy, because they had a huge brand, they had a huge marketing org, they had like layers of support around them on the sales team, they had a huge executive team that they could tap for support, their product team was doing stuff. Like, there was this whole ecosystem that they were able to just exist in. And then they come to your company that has none of those things. And I don't care how good they are, the sheer force of personality of one person is a really freaking slow way to try and grow revenue. And it's also not repeatable at all. So I would say like 60% of the companies that I talk to have some version of that story. And it just breaks my heart, because it can take a really long time to figure out that it's not working for you, or figure out why it's not working for you. And you burn so much runway and so many relationships and so much time. Like, it can set you back like 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, and cost millions in lost revenue.
Millions. Yeah, totally. And it just drags on, because they're like, we're having a lot of good conversations, and you're like, okay, I want to give them, the room to run, to do what they do, but you just gotta not do that.
Yeah. I mean, I read an article you talking about that, and I thought, we've got to highlight this even more. Yeah, you can't afford to. I mean, it could be the end of the business, because you're not going to get another tranche of money because you haven't proven your success. So it's it's absolutely critical you get it right. Again, going back to this database, if you want to benchmark who's the right person for the right seat, at all levels, from leader down to customer success, then you want to make sure that you're benchmarking what the requirements on the job
are.
on the job requirements, and does this person match that? And so much of sales success isn't really the skill set, isn't really the relationships, it's actually what goes on there. What are the limiting beliefs? What's their worldview? Are they willing to figure it out? Are they those types of people? And the thing is, people coming from enterprise often are not, because that's why they stayed in enterprise, sorry, for the last 20 years. Someone else figured it out for them. It's pretty, duh.
Yeah, that's so true. I just get to go in and I just get to do this thing, and like, that's all I have to worry about. 100%.
Exactly. Oh gosh, Monica, we're going to have to do this again, because it really is so much fun, and you kind of laying down the 101 here is I'm sure lots of people are going to be listening to this, and it will be getting traction. And so, how can listeners get hold of you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I post there every single day. I'm just LinkedIn/Monica Stewart. You can also go to my website. It's msps.co. Those are the two best places to find me, but definitely go to LinkedIn, follow me, subscribe to my page. A lot of the things that we just talked about today, I write about on a daily basis, and always open to receiving DMs there too.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Monica. I've loved talking to you. I thought this would be good, but I'm definitely, we're going to have to do this again because I've got so many more questions that I didn't get to. It's just the conversation was excellent. So thank you so much for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast, Monica Stewart.
Thank you so much for having me, Janice. This has just been the best.
If you enjoy this episode of Scale Your Sales podcast, explore other episodes of insightful guest conversations or watch the caption show on YouTube. Remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode filled with strategies to help you scale your sales. I love to hear your thoughts, so please share your views and leave a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more revenue generators just like you. So until next time, keep scaling your sales.